Hey, what is up YouTube? This is HyperGod back again for another video. This time we're not going to be talking about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game, but rather the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animated series. Now, it's been going on for a while now, since we're on Arc 5, which implies there have been 5 entire series of Yu-Gi-Oh! And so it stands to reason there would be some I would like more than others, correct? Correct. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. My top 5 favorite installments in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animated series. Now, before we get started, I'd like to just toss out a quick disclaimer. These are my opinions and by no means an actual indication on which series are universally better than others. Just which ones I like more, and as such will contain some of my own biases. I'll try and keep those to a minimum, but no promises. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Number 5. Okay, I know I said I was going to try and avoid being predictable here, but I'm pretty sure everyone on Earth saw this coming. Yeah, Zexal is the weak point of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animated series. But is it really as bad as everyone says it is? Well, not really. I mean, I was able to watch it all the way through from start to finish, so can't be that bad, can it? Well, to be honest, most of the issues with this series can be summed up in but a single word. Yuma. I cannot stand Yuma at all, ever, period. Screw him. He's a dumb main character. By far the worst protagonist I've ever seen, like, in an anime, to be honest. He's just that bad. Okay, compared to who we had before with Yugi, Jaden, Yusei, they knew what they were doing. And Yuma's... God... Guy couldn't duel his way out of a wet paper bag with a hole in the bottom. That's how bad he is at the start. I get what they were going for. They're going for someone a little bit more relatable, who's not like just born a king of games. I can get that. That's a great idea. But not square one, please. Don't have it so that he doesn't understand what half the cards in his deck do. Think I'm kidding? No, he actually asked to ask several times what certain cards in his deck do. That's how bad he is. However, take a step back, he's really the only legitimate issue. The other characters, for the most part, are actually pretty cool. I mean, this series Kaiba, known as Kaito, I know, real original, is actually a pretty cool character. And so are a lot of the other characters, like Shark, the 3 brothers that he has to fight, the Barbarian Emperors, and Zexal 2, which actually brings me to my next point. The real issue is Zexal. Zexal 2 is actually really good. I thoroughly enjoyed that from start to finish. In Zexal 1, Yuma's such an incompetent moron, even by the end of it, he still needs people to hold his hand through his duels. But in Zexal 2, even from the get-go, he's actually learned a bit. He's at a more tolerable point where we can actually enjoy watching him. There's actually several points in Zexal 2 where he has to kind of fight for himself without Astral's help, and he does a pretty decent job about it. It's actually kind of interesting to watch, so I'll kind of split this one down the middle and say 5.5 and then real 5. 5.5 is Zexal. True 5 is Zexal 2. I'm not going to do that with any of the others. It's just... If you need to watch Zexal, but you don't want to sit through how bad he is, just skip Zexal 1. Just go straight to Zexal 2. They'll basically explain who everyone else is. It's really not that big of a deal. It's Zexal 2 over Zexal 1. That's all I got. Number 4. Okay, so this is where things got a little bit more complicated for me because Zexal's kind of the obvious bottom of the barrel. But the others are kind of up in the air, really. There can be any order to it. And yes, mine is GX. Now, don't get me wrong, this was an incredibly difficult choice from this point, because I did really enjoy GX. But the thing about it is that it wasn't really a series with any middle grounds for me. It was either stuff that had stuff I really loved, or stuff I hated with a burning passion. And there was just slightly more on the hated with a burning passion than there was on the loved, so unfortunately it lands in the number 4 spot. But what was good about it? I mean, I had to have something good for it, right? And it did. It had some of the best characters and story plots I've ever seen. Starting with the story plots, we had the Light of Destruction arc and the undubbed Darkness arc. If you guys haven't seen that, you should definitely check it out. It's actually really cool. 4Kids missed out on not dubbing that. And then on top of that, we also have some really cool characters. like Zane Truesdale, Alex Rhodes, God, who else was? There was a lot of really cool characters. Sartorius, and of course, who can forget everyone's favorite, Jaden Yuki. I don't know what it was about Jaden. He was just kind of like a breath of fresh air, really. I mean, he wasn't always so serious about everything like Yugi was in the previous one. Jaden was more laid back. He realized it was just a game and was willing to try and let people realize that. He smiled more often than he scowled in his duels, and he really only scowled when the going got tough, and even then he would almost immediately turn back to the smile and just laugh and try and remind everyone, hey guys, it's just a game, have fun with it, don't take it so seriously, it's not like the fate of the world's at stake. Most of the time. But I digress on that. Unfortunately, as I said though, there were more issues for this series than there were things done right, and I do have to address that. The main issues for me are, ironically, the counterparts, basically everything I did not say I liked, including certain story arcs and characters. Story arcs I did not care for are obviously the ones that are left, Rise of the Sacred Beast and Yubel arc. It's weird, I actually did like Yubel, but that arc was just all over the place. It couldn't follow what was going on. I mean, first they're a Duel Academy, then they get warped to some different dimension, then they gotta find everyone, get back home, but then they get warped to some other dimension. I couldn't follow what was going on by the end of it. It was a mess. It was a cool idea, but a just big jumbled mess, and I don't know, I guess just because it was still so early on and Jaden was still so carefree, I couldn't really get that into Rise of the Sacred Beast because I just couldn't take him seriously in it. But then, like I said, there's a lot of also characters I didn't really care for, like Cyrus Truesdale, Chumley, Crowler, and Jaden. Okay, now I know, I just said I like Jaden, so how can I also not like him at the same time? Ironically, the same reason. He's too carefree. He doesn't take enough seriously. And 95% of the time this doesn't really bother me. It's really during the big fights that really count. For example, Rise of the Sacred Beast, when he's fighting the main bad guy, the person who is using these incredibly dangerous cards to literally suck the souls out of every other spirit card or whatever on the planet. Jaden's still just there laughing, having a great old time, trying to convince the bad guy who is doing all this, essentially committing mass genocide, to have fun, because it's a game. Dude, take it seriously! Man, the world's at stake here. And even with one of my personal favorites, Light of Destruction, when he's dueling Sartorius, a psychotic alien who is trying to destroy the world, he's still laughing and trying to act like it's a game and that he should have fun with it. What? How can you be so carefree and stupid at the same time? It's like a refreshing breath of crap. It's the best way I could think to word it. He's carefree when it counts, but when it doesn't, he just can't turn it off. And that kind of takes away from it. I mean, the big moral center actually comes in the undubbed fourth season, where in the end, he has to go back in time, duel Yugi, and try to relearn the lesson that he lost, which is that it's a game. Because around the Yubel arc, he starts to become more seriously because of the tragedies that he has seen up till that point, and does start to weigh down on him. And even in the fourth season, he's really not happy anymore at all. It's like polar, it's like emo Jaden, really. It's kind of weird, but it was a cool idea. The problem is, when you have a main character who doesn't take anything seriously in the beginning, like when it really matters, the whole lesson of him needing to remember it's just a game almost feels marred. Because majority of the time he was like that. It's just in the end he started to become all sullen and depressing, which unfortunately did kind of take away from it. On the whole, I did like GX, but it was those little things that really dragged it down for me. Anyway, moving on to number 3. I'm sorry. I really am. I know I'm already going to get so much hate for this one. Why is the original only third? Why isn't it the best? Because it's the original. Don't mean to sound like some weird pseudo-hipster or something like that, but truth be told to me, the original is only lacking because it's the original. Now, it's not to say I don't like the original. Some of my favorite moments out of all of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animated series is in the original. Duelist Kingdom, Waking the Dragons, freaking even the virtual world was pretty cool. So, with all that stuff, how can I possibly not like it? Well, let me just go ahead and appeal to the fanboys I've already pissed off by addressing what was good about it. I've already mentioned it had some amazing stories, also had some really cool characters. I mean, you had the original king of games, Yugi Muto himself, or Atem, or however you want to be. We'll count them as the same person. Seto Kaiba, easily one of my favorite characters out of the entirety of all of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animated series. Joey Wheeler, who I'm not too fond of, but you still gotta respect the man. Pegasus, Merrick, Bakura, all these cool guys. There's more people in this to love than to hate. The only people I can think of I really don't like are Tristan and Taya, and they sit backstage for the most part, so. And they're all really cool. They had some amazing duels. The Battle City semifinal between Yugi and Kaiba has got to be one of my absolute favorite duels. Clash at the Coliseum. I know the name of it. If I know the name of a specific duel, I can't possibly hate the series, can I? Well, for me, the main issue with it is, like I said, that it's the original. What do I mean by that? Well, originally, when it was still just a manga series, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was not even about cards to begin with. It was originally just supposed to be Yugi who found the Millennium Puzzle, fixed it, got the Spirit of the Pharaoh, and then the Pharaoh almost became like a sort of vigilante crime fighter who stopped evildoers through games. Not necessarily card games. Some of them aren't even really games. They're just sort of impromptu things he comes up with on the spot. For example, one thing that he does is to stop a man who is holding up a burger joint where Teo works. Yes, they incorporated that into there too. And the Pharaoh takes over Yugi and says, hey, let's play a game. We can only interact with each other using one finger, and whoever fails to do that first loses. And so the man who's holding up the place has a gun and says, fine, I'll choose my index finger so I can shoot you. Pharaoh says, okay, I'll choose my thumb. And all of a sudden it seems like all hope is lost because he's going to shoot your gun. And then all of a sudden the bad guy, who kind of had a just unlit cigar in his mouth, don't ask, Yugi just sets off a lighter. He's like, oh, right, I guess I'll kill you later. Go ahead and light me up. He lights him. The guy is, for some reason, then pouring a drink. And then Yugi takes the lighter, still lit, don't ask how, puts it on his hand, and walks off. At that point, he says, if you shoot me, the recoil will cause the lighter to fall. You are still pouring alcohol, 80 proof alcohol, mind you, so no matter what, you're kind of going to die. Yeah, he actually killed people in the original manga. It was pretty dark, but still also really cool. So, my point with that is, it wasn't even supposed to be about the card game. In fact, the anime is the only reason we even have the card game. When it first started off, there were really no rules, as is evidenced by the first duel. If you can follow anything that's going on rule-wise, I congratulate you, because I can't. As far as I'm concerned, they're just summoning monsters, and I don't even know what's going on with half of it. It's like, it seems like it's just a deck of monsters, and magically Exodia appeared at the end. That was really the only logical thing. Everything else just threw logic clean out the window. And even throughout the first real season of Duelist Kingdom, you could still see that as evidence through some of the BS plays. I activate Call of the Haunted, which brings back all my monsters as zombies. Bullshit, no it doesn't. You can't attack my monsters while they're underwater. Bullshit, yes I can. And all the other just various stupid things that they came up with was ridiculous. And it wasn't really even until Battle City they finally started to address the rules, and even then, they cheated like whores. Need I remind you about the infamous Clash at the Coliseum where Yugi was about to lose, and then all of a sudden remembered that mystical hidden effect of Flute of Summoning Dragon that lets the opponent summon a dragon too? Funny, I've read that card multiple times and it doesn't say that anywhere. And of course the infamous Card of Sanctity, where the translation is completely lost and it's not even remotely the same thing other than it lets you draw cards. Seriously, look up the actual Card of Sanctity. It's not even close. And that's really my issue with it, is that it was the starting point. It wasn't really supposed to be anything more than that. It was where we started. Gotta start somewhere, right? And every other series really expanded on it and made it more cohesive in terms of, you know, the plot elements, actually keeping to the rules consistently, adding on to it, it was still fun to watch. It was a great starting point, and it really did show what was what it had to offer and where it could improve. And that's really where it goes from. It's not that I think it's not worthy of being the best, it's that I think it stands safely as a good baseline for the series, which is why it's standing happily at number 3. Not the best, but also not the worst. It has areas it can still improve in. And now let's get on to the areas where I think it improved best. Number 2. Okay, so this is actually kind of an interesting one, because originally when I first came up with this list, like a couple of months ago, this is not what was supposed to be at number 2. This was supposed to be Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5. But something happened within Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 that changed my opinion of it, so now the original number 1 is not number 2, and the original number 2 is not number 1. But we'll get to that later. For now, we're here to talk about 5Ds, the original king of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animated series for me. And honestly, for me, it goes without saying that this is just one of the best that they had to offer. It had really cool story elements with the Mech Lord Emperors being the Grand Season Finale, and then even with the Dark Signers was such a cool idea. There was such a deep lore in this one, more than there has been any others. I mean, you had the Signers, who were supposed to, you know, be these grand heroes of lore in ancient times and all that jazz. And then the Dark Signers, who were just the evil counterparts. These monsters sealed under the earth, waiting to be awakened so that they could do battle with the Crimson Dragon. And the Crimson Dragon's guardians, or soldiers, if you will, were just these 5, eventually 6 dragons. It was so cool. I just loved it. Every aspect of it. The characters, the story, even the dueling motorcycles. For anyone who says dueling motorcycles was stupid, you can go and suck it, because that's the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life for this series. It had an element of danger. Same logic behind frickin' NASCAR. And now imagine NASCAR on motorcycles and with dragons. Yeah, tell me that wouldn't be amazing and that you wouldn't watch that. That's basically what 5Ds is, and people act like it's a stupid idea. No, it's awesome. I don't care what anyone says. And it also had some really cool characters. And this is rare for a series. They had character growth. Not all of them. Yusei was the same in the end as he was the beginning, more or less. But for certain other characters, you can see the growth. Like, Akiza and the twins had some of the best character growth I've ever seen. Akiza started off as just this hateful witch that wanted to see everyone dead. And I'm convinced she did kill some people. Maybe off screen, maybe on screen, I didn't notice. I don't know. She killed people, I'm sure. There's blood on her hands. And by the end of it, she becomes such a loving, caring person that she goes on to become a doctor. That's a drastic change from wanting to take lives to save them. And then the twins, too. I mean, they started off as like your typical twins. You got the boy who's troublesome and the girl who's quiet and reserved. It's very typical, but then they mellow each other out in the end, and so the girl's more outgoing and the boy's more reliable. I was about to say tame, but then I realized no, Leo is not tame by any stretch of the word. But he does become a more reliable person at the end of it, and that does really speak for them. You don't see that very often, especially in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Series where they basically claim there's growth, but if you look at it, there's not really. So this was refreshing. And that just beckons the question, why is it not number 1? Well, obviously, aside from Arc 5 having that magical thing that trumped it that we'll get to later, there was one real flaw for me with 5Ds. The relationships. Now, I know this is going to sound weird, especially since I'm a guy, but I'm a sucker for anime relationships. I just like to see them go through. Call me a shipper if you will, I probably am, but I enjoy those things. It's just one of those little subtle nuances that keeps me going through an animated series. And Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds actually had some good ones, too. The two I'm mostly referring to are Jack and Carly from the first season, and then Yusei and Akiza throughout the entirety of 5Ds. Now, why is that a bad thing? They set them up perfectly and did nothing. They dropped the entire relationships like a dead baby, plop. And it infuriates me to no end. Let's start with Jack and Carly, shall we? When they started off, they couldn't stand each other. It was just Carly saw Jack as an opportunity to further her career, and Jack saw Carly as some annoying news reporter who just was trying to further her career. Not far from the truth, ironically, but as they got to know each other through the circumstances that they, were kind of forced on them, they grew together. They started to see them not just as tools of the trade, but as people. And it almost improved on them. It was really nice to see that they were building on top of each other. When Carly became a Darksider, Jack felt responsible for that. He had nothing to do with it, but he still felt responsible in that he had to go and save her. Jack, one of the single most selfish people in the entire series, felt compelled to have to go and save her. And then when he failed and she died in his arms, that moment broke my heart. And to add on to that, during the final fight against Rex Goodwin, he sacrifices himself and has this thought that he will no longer be a selfish individual and will fight for others in Carly's memory. And you even see Carly saying that she could see Jack as the future king, holding a child on his arms, being a good person. It tore me up! I loved that! They were so great! And then guess what happened? Carly came back, lost her memory, and they went back to square fucking one where they didn't give a shit about each other. The relationship suddenly became some love spat between Carly, the agent girl, and some random coffee shop chick that was just thrown in there because, hey, three's a crowd or whatever. And they just went after Jack, who didn't give a shit about any of them. That was such wasted potential. I don't care that Carly came back. That's not what bothers me. What bothers me is that they just dropped it completely and wasted that perfect element of character development. Again, that is so rare in a Yu-Gi-Oh series. It's mostly just about the dueling and the action and stuff, but this actually took the time to set up relationships and then said, screw that noise! It just drives me crazy. But not nearly as much as Yusei and Akiza. Yusei and Akiza had not just the first season, they had the entire series to set up their relationship. And they did it really well. Not quite as good as Jack and Carly, but still really well. You could feel some sort of a chemistry between them. Akiza would blush whenever anyone mentioned the idea of them being together, and Yusei was usually willing to spend a good amount of his spare time with Akiza to help her out. More big brother-ish than lover, but I'll take what I can get. And then, in the final episode, they had the single most perfect setup for an anime couple kiss I have ever seen in an anime, period. I don't claim to have seen a lot, but I don't think there's any that can really top this. It was perfect. The light was dark, the room was only lit by the moonlight shining in. They were staring at each other after having a deep emotional conversation with each other about how they're happy that they met and how they really grew as people through them. You can see his reflection in her eyes, her reflection in his eyes. As you see his reflection in her eyes, she closes her eyes. They're holding hands. She makes the kissy face, for fuck's sake! And they let go of our hands. She says, I gotta go, and Yusei says, get out of here, you scamp. And that's it! Who does that? Who sets it up that, sinfully perfectly, and then says, nope? Again, I didn't need them to be a couple. I really didn't. The paths they set for each other were fine, with Akiza going off to be a doctor and Yusei staying behind. That's fine. But damn it all, they needed some closure for that. That one kiss is all I wanted. That's it, that's all I wanted, and I couldn't get that. That drives me insane. But I digress. As a whole, Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds is still one of my favorites, and for a while was. But now we're at the number one, the cream of the crop, the absolute best in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. I present to you number one. Surprise! Except not really, because I already told you what it was in number 2 spot. Yes, number 1 is Arc 5. Ironically, number 5 is my number 1, but I digress. What is it about Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 that I love so much? Everything! This, to me, is the single most perfect installment in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series they could have asked for. And it all really comes down to one reason. feels like a Yu-Gi-Oh anime more than the others before it have. What I mean by that is, if you take a look at all the previous installments in the Yu-Gi-Oh animated series, they've all kind of almost been like a promotion of sorts, as opposed to actually like a legitimate show. With the original, it was promoting the card game in general, because, you know, originally that's not even what it was supposed to be. It just happened to have a really good chapter with Magics and Wizards, which is what it was originally called before Duel Monsters. And they're just like, heck with it, let's milk this for all it's worth. By the way, did you know we actually make a card game out of this too? Let's go over there, Konami. And so the first one was just to promote the card game, and it did a good job. Once it started promoting it better, they actually came with rules for the series as well as for the card game. And then get to later installments like GX. Well, they realized, hold on, we can really exploit this fusion thing. And if we pre-make decks for people like archetypes, they'll sell even better. And so that's what they did. Almost every deck in there was fusion-based or archetype, or both. I mean, heck, look at Heroes. It's a fusion-based archetype. Then you move on to 5Ds. Hey, I got an idea. What about Synchro Monsters? Well, how are we going to promote it? 5Ds! All they do is Synchro Summon. And then, same with Xyz Monsters. That's all Zexal was a big Xyz promotion. Admittedly, 5Ds and Zexal each had a single fusion summon in them, but that was it. And it really just raised the question for me, why is it that they're all like that? But we'll get to that point later. We hit Arc 5. And I was going into this thinking, okay, it's just going to be the same old thing. They came out with pendulums. They're going to be promoting the pendulum monsters. It's going to be what the main guy does. He's just going to come out the gates like, pendulum, pendulum, pendulum. No, that's not what happened. When it starts out, pendulum summoning doesn't exist. It's not a thing. But the others are. Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, Ritual, just base advanced summoning decks. It's all there. But not pendulum summoning. I was so confused. Like, wait, hold on, why isn't... What? And then when he summoned his ace monster, the Odd Eyes Dragon. I was like, wait, don't you mean Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon? No, Odd Eyes Dragon. That was it. And then in the end of the first episode, he just wills pendulum cards into existence and does the first ever pendulum summon during a legal tournament. How that doesn't get him disqualified, I will never know. I think they said, like, the card... like the dual disc reader didn't give him an error message, so they're like, ah, screw it, it's legal. Which is some bullshit, but whatever. And from that point on, he's the only one that can do it. Or the only one that has pendulum cards. They eventually expand on that, but it's still not a common thing yet. It starts off with just everything else being commonplace, and pendulum is the new thing. And that was so cool. Plus, just actually seeing a world where it's more like reality. Where there's everything. I mean, unless you go to a tournament setting, you're really not going to see just all the same stuff. Like, with me, I'm a casual player. So, when I just go and duel with my friends, it's not just, you know, all Xyz or all Synchros. No, it's a combination. I've seen people use Yang Zing, Heroes, Cyber Dragons. I myself use a variety of things, mostly my Dragunities. I've seen the likes of it. It's all there. I've even seen Gishkis, Rituals. They're all there. It's not like it's that cut and dry as it was in the others. And that is where I get to the thing that separated this from 5Ds. Now, as I said, there was one instance in the Arc 5 anime that distinguished it from 5Ds for me. That was the episode where they explained the multidimensional theory. In there, they openly said, there is not but one, but 4 different dimensions. Standard. And then this is where it got weird. Fusion, Synchro, Xyz. There were different dimensions based on the different extra deck summoning methods. Now, at first that seems like, oh, okay, well, who cares? I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea. New. Would you like to know where it gets better? Yes? Good. No? Shut up, listen anyway. They actually show what each of them look like. The fusion dimension is also known as Academia, where everyone goes around wearing red, yellow, and blue jackets or blazers. Sound familiar? Sounds like GX to me. And then even when they invade later, guess who accompanies one of the main characters? Obelisk Force. They're named after the Egyptian freaking gods. You notice I don't see them in the others? Well, guess what? Their own dimensions. We finally meet someone from the Synchro dimension. Guess what he's doing? Riding on a dual runner. The motorcycles. And all he does is Synchro summon. Then we meet some people from the Xyz dimension. Guess what? They build the overlay network same as before, and they come from a world known as Heartland. Now, I'm sure this is not going to be the most common known knowledge since a lot of people try and avoid Zexal, but Zexal takes place in a town called Heartland. And if you see it, it is identical. Like, I'm not kidding. It looks exactly the same in Zexal as it did in the Arc 5 flashback to their Heartland. It's the same thing. They're not separated by time as was previously believed. Originally, we just thought, okay, at first it was Yu-Gi-Oh!, some time passed, then we got GX, and a lot of time passed, and we hit 5Ds. Even more time passed, and we're at Zexal, and now even more time passed, and we're back here at 5Ds. No! Or Arc 5, sorry. It's just dimensions, which raises some confusing stories about the 3D Bonds of Time movie, but, well, that doesn't count. It's such an interesting theory about it because you realize it makes sense. That's why it's all we see. We didn't think about it that much in GX because there was nothing else, so yeah, what else would they have done? But then we get to 5Ds and Zexal, and why aren't they doing any of the previous things? We see one instance of fusion in each of those, and in Zexal we see no synchro summoning at all. And it makes sense when you view it from the dimension idea, where it's just their own separate dimensions where that's all they do. It also explains why the lores are so different. At the end of 5Ds, they explain that there's this post-apocalyptic world because of the mass energy synchro summoning created. But then we get to frickin' Zexal, and I see none of that. It looks like synchro summoning's just left the face of the earth. And that makes no sense. How can be a post-apocalyptic future with that, then? And then in Zexal, there's ancient times where we see the numbers are there, in, like, again, these feudal periods before the card game could have existed, but they're Xyz monsters. So it just raised the question, how is that possible? And 5D, Arc 5 finally decided to add some cohesiveness and explain that. It just seemed like sloppy writing at first. Just, oh, screw it, no one's going to notice that. Sorry, we notice. And then Arc 5 is like, nope, we're going to fix this. Just different dimensions is all it is. And that was ingenious. I love it for that. I love it for how real it feels. It has some awesome characters. Yuya's got to be my favorite protagonist so far. God, I'm getting my words all jumbled today, aren't I? I mean, he's just so fun to watch. He's kind of like Jaden, and just that he's so carefree, but he still does care. I mean, he's willing to take battle seriously, but he can only do it by entertaining others. He sees it for what it is, a game, an opportunity to make others happy by watching. And for me, he has like one of the single best, like, I'm gonna win moments. You know how they all had their own, not so much with Yugi, but he kind of had his smirk. Jaden had his sort of smirk too. It really didn't start until 5Ds, where Yusei had that sort of weird connecting the dots lightning card thing, and then he would win. And then same with Yuma. He had it whenever he turned Zexal for the most part, or would say Kato Bing, his thing. It was, I forget what it was in the English dub. I think I'm feeling the flow, I don't know. Whenever he did that, he would pretty much be guaranteed to win in that move. Yuya's is easily the best one I've seen so far. He will somehow magically make spotlights appear on him and just go, "Ladies and gentlemen!" Like an entertainer, like a ringleader. And with how his deck works of cardies, it's genius. I love watching that. I'm just drawn in whenever he does that. Like, I need to see what he does next. It's just so cool. I want to see what I know he's going to win, but I still want to see how. Just him captivating, drawing the audience in. I love it. That's all I got. That's my top 5 list. Tell me what you guys think down below, if you agree, if I'm completely wrong and I've dishonored some of the other series. Just let me know in the comments down below. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.